Welcome, everyone, to the Focus, Freedom, and Flow podcast. I'm your co host, Jackson Ferguson, and I'm joined by pro basketball player Axel Louison. Today, we're honored and thrilled to welcome Mike Franco, a mental performance coach who has worked full time inside NBA and Major League Baseball teams, including the Dallas Mavericks, the Orlando Magics, and the Texas Rangers. Mike brings a rare perspective on what it truly takes to train the mind, to build a culture, and perform under pressure. Through this conversation, our hope is to help people better understand what mental training really means, not just as a good idea, but as a lived practice, and to share how professional teams are working with these tools at the highest level. We also hope this episode will inspire athletes, coaches, parents, and leaders to take their own in-game training seriously and to trust that this work can deeply transform performance, well-being, and human connection. Mike, thank you so much for being with us today. We're very grateful.
Man, thank you guys for having me on. And I appreciate you asking. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Cool. So maybe before we talk about NBA performance, we'd love to know a little bit about your story. Who were you before that work and what pulled you towards the mental side of the game and
For
performance?
sure. So I've always loved competition. I think that's like some of the same path of anyone who gets into this work, loving competition, um, loving sports, and seeing like teams and players come together and rise up and see what you can accomplish. But for me, I had such a wonderful high school experience, over here in America, just in high school years, playing football, basketball. I just felt like I had really good coaches around me. I had really good cultures, environments, and like that just really was something that was impactful for the rest of my life. Now, I didn't know mental performance or any type of performance coaching existed at the time. And so kind of indirectly we had that within our team without knowing it. So that was one layer. The second layer is as I'm navigating this journey, I actually worked in hospitality, so like hotels, restaurants, and I worked at very high level hotels and restaurants for quite a few years, up to my mid 20s. And in that, I was able to be around high level athletes by default, by some of the places I worked with. And so, in a way, I felt like, okay, that prepared me for the work that was coming, even though I didn't know it was coming yet. So that was like a very unique and interesting experience. And in a different level, you talk about pressure. Having those type of hotel jobs was a very, a very interesting experience, and where everything needs to be done now and immediately. And so I really, I loved that time. That was a very integral part of my life. Fast forward a few years as I'm figuring out my next steps, went to grad school for sports psychology, and I didn't even know such a thing existed. It just so happened I was at a local gym when I was living in San Jose, California, and there was a guy coming in talking to us about performing under pressure, being confident, being focused, and I didn't even know like what exactly who he was, what he did, but I was like, I want that. Like I'm really into that. And so he gave me a few books to read. Applied to grad school, and got my master's in sports psychology. And through that time, that's where I met one of your former guests, Graham Betchart, who really got me on this path of working in basketball. And through Graham, he was so welcoming, answered all my questions, introduced me to so many people. And so that was like so instrumental in my growth during that time. Meeting Graham, going through the sports psychology process, and it just really helped me understand the entire ecosystem of sport, and that was like very impactful for me.
Cool, awesome. Maybe one thing, because for some reason books are often part of the path. So
Yeah.
I was wondering, do you have like one book that you could suggest to people that want to start looking into that because you mentioned it?
Yeah. So I just remember, well, I'll give you the two that were recommended to me. I'm pretty sure it was three, but two that really jump off the top of my head. I read Mind Gym by Gary Mack, kind of a very simple introductory sports psych book. I also read The Talent Code. I believe it's Daniel Coyle. That was a very, just kind of impactful book for me. Of course, I'm gonna plug our guy Graham's book, Play Present, and that was also for basketball, I mean, there's no better, simpler way to learn than
Yeah.
that. So those were like the three that I kind of got going with.
Yeah, so so that journey eventually takes you to inside your first professional team, the Dallas Mavericks. And when you first step into that environment in Dallas Mavericks, what was, I mean, was it what you thought it would be? And what was your first impression? And what surprised you the most? I'm curious about that.
Okay, so I will say I didn't have many expectations. I really didn't know what to expect. I'm a California guy moving to Texas, already a big change. And so I step in there first couple of days. Everyone was so welcoming, from the coaching staff to the players, training staff. I was welcomed, and that made a really, really huge difference. Mike Procopio, Al Whitley, Don Kalkstein, the man who hired me, who's been doing mental performance work with Dallas for over 20 years. Like they just really welcomed me. And one story that in particular, like multiple players did this, but especially like, Dirk Nowitzki coming right up and like, welcome to the team, like happy to have you, just big smile on his face. And, it's not just him that did that, but other players did that. No, everyone knows Dirk though. And so that was just a very impactful time, that those first few days, because I never felt at the beginning like isolated. It wasn't like, I was treading lightly because I just didn't know how the inner workings of a team worked like that yet. I'd never been in that situation. You could read about it, you could hear about it, but until you're in it, you don't know. So I felt like, I was guided very well. Also, Casey Smith, the head athletic trainer, everyone was very welcoming and introducing me to people and made me feel a part of it.
And so now, and once you get in, so what do you have to do? What are you asked to do? What's your first job? What does it look like?
Yeah, that kind of goes off what Axel just said of like, what did you least expect? Well, actually, we call him DK, Don Kalkstein. DK sat me down. He's like, Franco, you know, one thing you need to do, like, I don't want you to teach anything. I want you to just build relationships with people, and that's it. And so that was such a, I think it's such a change, because in school and coming out of, I'm a couple of years removed from grad school, and when you're being a consultant, or however you're teaching one on one, the usual path, you're just constantly teaching and helping and sharing knowledge and helping people grow and coaching. This time it's almost the opposite of like, pull back a little bit, actually a lot, and we just want you to get to know each other, because the NBA environment, and team environment is so different. Coming in just trying to coach right away doesn't always work that way. And so DK's advice to me, he also said, do what you see fit. He let me be, find my own way. But that advice was so helpful. Just, be around. Can you help rebound? Get to know people. Are you spending time? Are you being, aware of the surroundings you're in? In terms of like, it's a big facility in Axel. I'm sure you've experienced this, but everyone also is kind of like, has their own little area. The strength coach has his area, the training staff has their area. So can you build relationships within each department? And that's, so important. It's just so important for people to get to know you, be seen as part of the fabric of the team. And I found that to be, shocking advice at the beginning, yet very valuable. And just getting to know people on a human level, not a performance level.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. Because you'd expect like a pro team, they hire someone, they want you to get the job done, get results. I'm actually really happy to hear that. That seems really smart and the right thing to do. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think there's a level of trust with that, right? Like, especially in
Yeah.
professional sports, there's a level of trust that needs to be built. And when we're talking about
Hmm.
mindset and like, trust is everything. Relationships
Yeah.
are so important. And I'm Axel. I'm sure from your experience, you've experienced that with coaches as well on other levels of performance. But you want people to be around you that trust, and that takes time. It's not coming in right away, just saying I know better or I know this. And so that was just really impactful from what DK said to me.
Yeah. And maybe all that sounds very nice. What was the biggest challenge at the beginning, maybe for you?
the challenge in that is also, it's like kind of a two-sided thing, right? You know, you're building relationships, and then the challenge is also like, all right, well, where do I start? What's the best path forward? and and it's kind of like, in a way, it's finding your way within the team system. And part of my work was really be helping out rookies, two-way contract guys. I was traveling with the G League team, which is like our minor league team. And I don't know what that would be equivalent for you guys, but it's like the one step below the professional team. And so some of the challenges that come with that is the travel schedule. So now there's a lot of energy being expended on travel. There's also, how are you going to fit in your program around what the team is already doing? And some of it can be separate, but really, though, you want to be seen as like the fabric of the team. And so that all takes time and conversations and figuring out. But I think, like, if I had to go back to really the main challenges, it was the getting used to the travel and the rhythm of the day to day at the beginning. And then, okay, well, what is really feasible to create a program with?
So yeah, you've worked with several professional teams, such as the Mavericks, as we said, the Rangers as well,
Hmm.
over the years. And I'm curious about, how did your role and your approach evolve from one environment to the next? And what did each experience teach you?
Yeah. So that's, I was reflecting on that the other day. And I was looking at, my time in Dallas, like how I mentioned with the G League, and I'm finding my way of like just teaching a foundational core skill set. I'm learning, with the Mavericks too, of like, okay, what works with teaching, building trust, relationships, how is that done within the ecosystem of a team? Also, one thing I would just say that's a challenge, but also very important, is getting on the same page with the head coach. Like, that is just like a very crucial aspect of all of this, because, you want to support his message and his voice. And so I'll say in Dallas, I was just, my work evolved from, I'm just figuring all that out. And of course, each year I got a little bit better, found my voice and rhythm a little bit. With the Rangers, the work evolved. It was a larger number of people. A baseball team is like double the size of a basketball team. So navigating that, but also I think the work evolved. It's a different age group. So baseball players that are in the major leagues are typically older than NBA players, at least than we had in Dallas. They're more late to mid 20s. And so, one of the biggest lessons I learned with the Rangers was being a good separator of sport and life. And I look around and I see, some of these, we had more veteran pitchers, and they were really good and skilled at knowing when they need to show up to the ballpark, what to do in their time off, very intentional about it, and they didn't make the sport their whole life. And like they really were able to separate baseball from, like, this is what I do, not who I am. And I noticed those were the more, they've had a lot of success. They've been in the major leagues a long time, which is very challenging to do. And, they would find ways to get outside, even on the road, whether it's golf, whether it's lunches or going out to a coffee shop before the game, or late night dinner. But they would find ways to separate themselves and not let the last game and not bring it into the next one. And that is like a very important skill set that I saw, and kind of like the lesson I took away from that time, and how crucial that is the deeper you are into your career. And then with the Magic, my work evolved from a way of, Dallas, if I looked at it as like I'm trying to teach a core foundational skill set, navigate the rhythm of the NBA. With Orlando, I started putting things on film, showing body language, putting together film edit clips of helping players buy into their role. Uh, and not just like buy-in, but like, highlighting strengths, showing, impact and presence without even scoring. So trying to put some of the mental performance work onto film while still supporting the coach's message and the player's individual goals at the same time, which was, tricky, but I felt like, I had good enough relationships there where, that was possible to happen. So I was very proud of the way I approached that.
Mm. So for anyone that listen to us, I guess they want to know how they can apply like everything that we said in their own life or performance. So my question is, what do you feel are the most important skills and mindsets you teach to elite athletes?
Hmm. So I think the first one is, having a foundation, and I'm sure, this may be a little crossover from Graham's episode, but what's in your control? Can you move on to the next play, and you bring it back to the present right away? I think if you can solve those three things and kind of filter yourself through those three practices. Can I be present in the moment? Can I move on to the next play? Is this situation in or out of my control? If you can start there, you can start that today. And then, but what I really think too is also having a system and a process in place to start your day and to end your day. So you can turn off at the end of the day and have a system where you can leave your work at the door, and you have a process and system to start the day where it's like, this is how I want to show up. This is how I want to be today. Here's maybe even previewing some areas, like here's sometimes where I may slip out of how I want to be, but then we have a process to get it back. So I like, being able to build that within your day, take some self-reflection at the beginning, but like having a process and a system to do that and to start and end your day is what I've found to be very, very helpful, because you can have these skills, right? You can have the breathing, you can have the visualization, but you want to also have a process and a system to implement those in your day to day, that you already know you can go to. I'll frame it this way. It's like, Axel and Jackson, you probably, since you've both played, you probably know, okay, at the last 2 minutes of the game, we know what plays we're going to run. We know what defense we want to be in. So you don't have to be guessing. You already know. You have a system for that. You have a process for that. You know what that package is to do. So look at it the same way. Previewing those situations and what can I build around that?
And so, do you have an example? Like, what system would the players put in place for beginning and end of the day?
Yeah, so some example could be, I did know some players, they would start their day maybe in their car or even at their locker. They could just do like a quick little 5 minute meditation and come in. Maybe they go get some treatment. That's part of their day. They get in early, they get some treatment. They might go through a light lift. Some of this is already scheduling, but it's still part of a process.
Yeah.
And then sharpening that sword could be, do I get on the court? Like get on the court, gets
Mhm.
15, 20 minutes of shots up. And so you're sharpening some of these physical tools, right? But at the same time, that's still to me part like a mental skill. Like that is part of being
Yeah.
a professional. And
Yeah.
and it's getting yourself ready to practice. So you just don't show up hoping and being ready to practice. You are able to be prepared and ready to practice. You're already primed for that. And then that could be, going back to your locker, reviewing again, this is who I am as a player, this is how I want to show up today. You could have some cue words already built in, or maybe remind yourself an example, just kind of like, all right, I'm going to choose how I'm going to show up in this moment when I step on the court when practice starts. That could be one way you can start your day. That could be a
Mhm.
system you do. So, and then to end it, a lot of times it could be, what's your process of like down regulating and letting go? So after the game, do you do some deep breathing? You can use like taking a shower or getting in your car or changing your clothes to symbolically, like, when I take a shower or get in my car, that lets go of the day. How do I end it? Maybe it's doing a quick little journaling session, I'm talking like 5 minutes or less of reflecting and writing. And how did I take this moment and learn and grow from it? Those could be all, quick systems. It doesn't have to be anything long, but things that have meaning to you that help you let go and move forward. And that for you, it's like, this day is over. I can end it right here, and I'm going to take it and let it go.
Cool, thanks. And yeah, maybe for the people listening, if they didn't listen to the Graham episode, they should, because of course that very nice of you. You didn't want to repeat everything that Graham said because that's a big part of what mental skills are, I think, in the NBA. But so maybe if people haven't listened to the Graham show, they can listen to that to complement this episode. But maybe one thing, if you don't mind talking more about, is about showing up, because I think that's an expression, a wording that I've heard a lot in the US.
Mm-hmm.
How do you want to show up?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how much people understand here what that means, and what would be an example. How do different NBA players want to show up in the morning? What does that mean? Do you mind talking a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think this goes to building an identity as a player, and I think if you watch yourself play, or sorry, if you watch if let's say we watch Steph Curry play, Jackson, let me ask you, actually, I'm just going to
All
flip a
right.
question on you. What do you see when you watch Steph Curry play?
I see focus. I see fun for sure. Joy in the game, energy,
Yeah.
high energy, and
So
focus.
yeah, that you kind of hit it on the head. You see focus, you see fun. Joy is a big one he always talks about, and so he started to define who he is as a player every single time he steps on the court. And these are characteristics to me that are have nothing to do with scoring, nothing to do with even having the
Hmm.
basketball. It's like a presence and an impact.
Yeah.
And so when we say show up, it's like, almost like what travels with you every single day. What are we going to see every single game, whether the results are going your way or not? It's like, what does that look
Hmm.
like to you? What is that identity as a player? And it doesn't have to be many things at all. It could just be something
Yeah.
like physical and focused. But the key is that you create those definitions of words for yourself, and
Hmm.
you define it. Now,
Okay.
don't not letting other people define it. So at the end of the day, and if we talk
Yeah.
about tying together what's a system for me to evaluate my day at the end and let go, if you
Hmm.
have those identities defined and values defined for yourself, and you could say, yes, I was in the moment. Yes, I was a physical player today. Yes, I played with joy and fun. Then that's what you can live with at the end of the game, whether you scored 50
Yeah.
points or whether you scored 0 points. That's
Yeah. You showed up the way you wanted to show up.
And
Yeah.
if you can show up the way you wanted
Hmm.
to show up, and sometimes those answers might not be yes to everything, then you go in and it's like, all right, why
Yeah.
not? Maybe I need to shift
Hmm.
that. Maybe what happened, what got in the way,
Yeah.
and then that's where the work comes in. But that's
Yeah.
what I mean by
Okay.
how do you want to show up? Is you really define that for yourself, and you stay ruthlessly consistent at that.
Yeah. Cool. There's one thing you touched on quickly before. I want to come back on that. Is one thing that really I kind of noticed these last few years. I was rereading Phil Jackson's book. So Phil Jackson was the coach of the Chicago Bulls with Jordan, and then the Lakers and Kobe. And I think he's one of the first guys that brought mindfulness to sports in the U.S. with
Mm-hmm.
the work of George Mumford. And rereading the books, it seems like he brought mindfulness and mental work to unite the team. Phil Jackson's vision was really to bring to bring the team together, the Bulls together. And now it really seems to me, maybe I'm wrong on that, I don't know, but that mental skills has shifted to something more individualistic, like, oh, like this player needs to focus more, this player needs to, deal with his emotions better. And you touched on that a little bit, how complex it seems to be, like in an NBA team, to be aligned with the coach, to get the team to perform as a unit, but then also to manage the individual work. So, I mean, complex question, but so can you maybe talk a little bit about that? How do you handle all that?
Yeah. So I think there's a few factors in this. First of all, how does the team and organization want to utilize you, as in like myself as the mental performance coach? How do you want to be utilized? Do they just want you to work with players individually? Is it a part of your role to
Mm,
help create the
yeah.
culture? Those are questions to be answered ahead of time. But I will say, I've found it is looking at from my point of view in my position is looking at other departments as partners. We are all on the same page together. We are all partners in this, and the head coach is the voice that you want to support. Yes, you're there for the players. The answer to a lot of things is yes. And you're there, but the head coach is the voice, and you are partnering with these other departments, whether it's the medical side, the player development side, all the assistant coaches. And so I think it's having the same message, being on the same page with that message of whatever the head coach is pushing out there, and supporting that message. Now, and this is where it can be a gray area. Players might have their individual goals. Like, sure, you should, you absolutely should, but also how can we do that within the team? And I think sometimes it seems like you can have only one or the other, but I do believe you can have both. I do believe you can hit your individual goals, and I do think you can do it within the context of the team. And look at Michael Jordan. He wanted to be the greatest ever, and he still did it within learning the triangle offense, being the part of a team. Now he did it in his own way, but it's still within the team, and the goal was winning. And so I believe so much of that is supporting the messaging. I believe it's supporting the coaches if they want that support, and helping them with developing players and being in their roles. And I do think, though, it's like creating a shared language. Whatever that shared language is, if you're not creating it, as in myself, the mental performance coach, there's certain words, like we could say next play, but like, can we create that shared language? Can we show it on film? Can we back it up? Is that something that everyone knows what that is? So having that shared language, shared common goal, and pushing all in the same direction, I believe that is, things you want to strive for, obviously, like a Phil Jackson, is getting everyone on the same page and moving forward.
Mhm. Thanks.
Yeah.
You were talking to me very positively about the I forgot his name, but the Orlando Magic coach.
hmm
Do you have an example? I always like to create a clear picture or example in people's minds. So was there something that was important for him, and how did you implement that working with the players and the mental skills part?
So with the Orlando Magic, one project I worked on was, I was really implementing, next play mentality, showing what it looks like to move on to the next play, and to really be in the moment and not stop yourself. And so what we would do is also wanting to show us to come together as a team, because it can get very separate at times, especially when things aren't going your way. But I wanted to show on film, our huddles, our communication in the timeouts, and we obviously we had the resources, thankfully enough, to do that in the NBA, but we would show film of that, and also really highlighting when our players moved on to the next play, but also taking on the other side of when teams didn't. When they, I know Graham has talked about palms up, and when we would find clips of players going palms up, and I would have a few moments where I'd show that on film and show this is where we could take advantage of it. So if we're going to be this relentless team, if we're going to be a team that plays physical, shows up with presence, that is part of being a palms down team. That is moving on to the next play, is having presence. And so if we're going to talk about it, let's also show and highlight where those areas are. That's after someone even gives you assists you on a bucket, are you pointing at them? Are we coming together when things are starting to, they maybe go on a 4-0 run? It's okay. Like, maybe a bad call. We have the group support each other, because it is going back a little bit, Jackson. What you're saying is like, it is individual, but you can also have your teammates support you on your pursuit to be in the moment, right? You can do little things on the court to support each other. That's talking in the timeouts. That's having great huddles, high-fiving, pointing, highlighting small moments on film, because when the margins are so small in the NBA, and not just the NBA, just basketball in general, the margins can be so small. Like winning those little moments, being present longer than the next guy, and showing the impact of just not scoring, but like, can you just run back on defense, and showing how many opportunities that creates for you, and it just keeps you more engaged in the game.
So, what about the coaches? Because you said your role is to support the message of the coach, right? But how they should train, think, and also manage pressure. How do you help them to do that as a mental coach for the coach?
So sometimes for me, it would just be a sounding board for the coaches, and there's different levels of coaches. Some are more veteran, some are younger, trying to find their way and their voice. And, some of it for me was just being a sounding board for them at the beginning. And, what are some things I can help out with? And part of it is me, putting my own education out there. Here's how some areas I can help in. I've had a lot of really great relationships. I'm very thankful for that with our coaching staff, especially in Orlando. But it could be helping someone with sleep. That's a big thing. Like sleep, so it could be what is, creating a wind down process again, or kind of shutting down the day as we talked about before. It could be helping them create like a meditation. Maybe that's going to help them sleep. It could be also, scouts are a big part of this, like the scouting report before the game. And when you do your scout in front of the team, like that's a big deal to have that honor and opportunity to do a scout. And so for some of our coaches that are wanting to get to the next level, I would be in their room helping them, go through the scouting report. How's their tone? How's their voice? Does it make sense? Is it too long? Is it too short? And now some of those I have to educate myself on what should be an effective scout, right? I have to do my research and due diligence on that, and I'm not the expert on that, but I can help them, with their pacing, their tone, uh, even just sitting there helping them out with that helps with their confidence. And so those are some ways I've helped support it. And, some of it is watching them in drills. Coaches would ask me to watch how's their body language, how is their presence in the drills when they're running it. Is their voice loud enough? Is it clear enough? And they would ask me for feedback on that. And so those are just like small, simple ways to help the coaches. And I ultimately think like the coaches for the work we do is like our biggest partners, and they're around the players more than anyone. And so helping the assistant coaches show up at their best and whatever they need is crucial. And sometimes on my end it's just sharing the language I'm using with the proactive teaching, as we talked about, next play mentality, being palms down. Um, I think that's all like so crucial. And maybe it's like, hey, we're working on confidence around this area and bringing the player into it. So not having it be so siloed, but like just being open. And we're not telling secrets here that the players may be like, hey, don't talk about this. But it's just like, hey, this is what we're working on. Let's bring in the coach. Like let's see what we can figure out all together to help this, because ultimately it's about the team winning and the player getting better. And so looking at him as a partner, not a barrier. Just not extra, not on the side. It's like, no, let's create some really great partnerships to help our team get better.
Thanks. There's one more thing about how to implement that in teams that really interests me, because the coaches and also maybe federation people I've talked to, it always seems right now here, it kind of seems that, okay, we're going to bring mindfulness, we're going to bring mental training, but that's one more thing we have to add to the schedule.
Mm.
And you talked about culture, and I feel that you really tried to seamlessly bring that into the culture. So how can you speak on that? How do you bring mental skills? How do you bring that in the culture without it being one more thing on the schedule?
So what I did,
See what?
yeah. So and one last thing and this is sort of answers this question too, but one last thing I want to say on like partnering with the coaches, it's also understanding their language, like what the coaches' language is that they're teaching the players. So like I would help rebound in drills. Here I'm listening to what they're talking about. I would also kind of sit in on the side before games on film sessions with the players, like, and it's listening it's not listening to know what's going on exactly, but it's like what is the language being used? What are some things that they're working on? Is it helping the player be more physical? Is it just more confidence in the shot, or maybe just I want to be a little researcher within that, and so I can help support the coach's language too. It's all coming from a place of support, and so
Mm.
to tie that into the question you just asked though too, is like, how am I integrating this in? I try to just eventually meet people where they're at. Where are the players at? How are they already learning? So that's where some of the film came in, and I would do that and find moments where I knew there'd be a couple extra minutes and I wouldn't take a lot of time per se, and find moments, whether we're already at the locker room, go off in a room on the side, do a quick, like, 3-minute film session with integrating mental skills already into like the film clips of basketball. On the road, I would find times before or after practice, so already kind of like buffering into the day, finding pockets of time where it's not completely taking away from the schedule or adding more. I think it's different than the way I operated, is more like micro meetings, like 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 20, but sometimes, after a practice, those would turn into 2 hours because someone just want to talk. But it's having moments where being conscious of, I know there's treatment happening, I know there's media, I know there's already film sessions with the coach, there's the actual practice. So understanding the schedule, which is kind of going back to like what I had to learn that first year, there's so many layers to it and every team schedules differently. And okay, then where are the best opportunities to fit this in? We're also keeping in mind like the players aren't the most exhausted. Some of that is reading the room a little bit, and and then there's moments where the coach would give me time in front of the team, so that's already built in. And so if I was to say, if you really did want to do a team individual, I guess mindset type of drill, you could do breathing for 5 or 3 to 5 minutes before practice. It doesn't take that like long. It just depends again back to what the coach might want to do. What does that beginning of practice look like, or can people do it individually? And so I'll just kind of wrap it up with this though, just on your question. I do think mindfulness, like, if we're talking about being in the moment, being present, that can also be taught within each drill too. Helping players be present for each shot, each drill, helping them move on to the next play. That can all be part of the system without even knowing you're really teaching them that.
But did you have mindfulness session with the whole team? Does that happen?
I have done it with teams before. I would say that is, I found it challenging to keep it consistent, at least from my experience. But yes, we have had sessions like that with the whole team. And a good way of doing it, was when we had recovery days. It also depends on the schedule. Like baseball, I would offer it before every game, and you could show up if you
Hmm.
wanted to or not.
Mm, mm,
Those are some ways I tried to implement it.
okay.
Coach included?
Coach included. Yeah,
Hmm,
yeah, definitely.
nice. So let's jump into the draft process,
Yeah.
because it's something I always found fascinating. Every year we see players like I mean Nikola Jokic, Draymond Green, drafted late and who became superstars. And at the same time, we see lottery picks who don't blossom. So, from your perspective, what really makes the difference over time? And how do teams try to evaluate things like mindset and the mental side when they draft young players?
All right. If I knew the answer to this, I mean, we would hit on every draft pick. But I'll tell you how I've operated with some drafts. I think it's so unpredictable personally, and I think from a mindset side, I would try to really find out, have a very basic series of questions of just getting to know, you have a limited amount of time to get to know the person. There's a whole process. And I want to say at the beginning, evaluating like the mindset is just a piece of the puzzle. There's scouts that have known this player for years and have done so much deep research. There is, just the obvious film. So there's so many little pieces that go into this. Agent relationships. And so there's, talks have been going on for players for quite some time. But from a mindset perspective, I really want to know certain basic examples of, tell me about who you are as a player. Do you have examples to back it up? Because it's easy for me to sit here if I was interviewing you, Axel, for the draft, and be like, hey, like, you know, are you a leader? Well, that's not really, of course they're going to say yes. Of course you would say yes. I would think so. And, but it's like, okay, I need to hear examples of that. How have you done it? Going a layer deeper. And then can we go a layer deeper after that? Um, and just finding out, like, are these examples real? Is this, and there's really no right or wrong answer. It's just how you answer it. And so then we can interpret it from there. And so I think a huge factor of, I like to keep track of players that have kind of risen up and may, I guess, how you want to call it, make it in the NBA. And something that I've seen that's been very key as a trait is just being very competitive. And it's not, 100% predictor by any means, but like just being competitive. We had Jalen Brunson in Dallas, and he was so competitive. And that's not just competing with others, but like competing with himself. He had talking about someone who had great routines, always very consistent in his approach every single day, very consistent in his habits and his work ethic, but also being competitive just in everything he did, like competitive with getting better, playing cards, whatever it was. Like he was just a very competitive being, and 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 so I think as I've kind of like even stepped back from teams and look at players, it's like that having that competitiveness is like very, very important. Mixed in with other things like work ethic, and I think from an organizational point of view too, to help the draft process is really defining what kind of player are you looking for. I think that's such a huge part of this. Can we define, like kind of we talked about earlier, defining like what kind of player do you want to show up as, but as an organization, like what type of player are we looking for? What is, a Dallas Maverick? What is an Orlando Magic player? And knowing what that is. So if you can define that, and then we can, ask some questions around that or better evaluate. But I think that's a really crucial part, is knowing like, what type of player are we really looking for, and what are those traits, and having full on definitions of those traits. Because if I say I want someone that's competitive, but Jackson has a different definition, and then Axel has a different definition, and then I have a different definition of that, well, then that just creates confusion. So being all on the same page organizationally of what that means as well.
And of course, I mean, there's no simple answer, but
Yeah.
I still have to ask. I'm curious because like Axel said, it's so fascinating how unpredictable the draft is, really. And so the players that have been draft number one draft picks that really don't blossom to anything that was expected, do you think a big part of that is mental, or there's other factors that, of course, there could be injury, but I mean, outside of injury, is it the mental side that, because like you said, like all the work that's put into scouting, you would think you know the guy and he's drafted number one, number two, and it doesn't happen.
There's so many factors that could go into that. And I will say a big thing we did in Dallas, which I was so proud of that we did, and so thankful that, DK and Mike Procopio, our player development director at the time, is when someone comes into your team, it's like, do you also then have the support system to help them develop as a professional basketball player? And we're talking now, the work is going to be there, like the on skills training, the film work, the practice, the weight room, the resources are there. But what we really focused on was then supporting the player, and some didn't need as much help, some did, but like mandatory meetings with us at times, and it's more just checking in. How's everything going? Like giving them a place to share their voice, but also can we help them develop a routine? Do they need help with any of the scheduling? Because, becoming an NBA player, there's a lot coming at you. And whether it's media, you're moving to a new place, you name it. There's a lot coming at you. So getting through, really trying to thrive that first year and that second year, and finding your role, finding your way, having people to talk to about it. Also having people, like I said, helping them develop processes and systems to, start the day, end the day, be consistent. Like that is a huge part of it too. It's like, is that support there for the athletes you draft? And I think that was really critical in our work, because there's a learning curve.
Thanks. And so there's something that it's pretty unique in sports. Not everybody can live it that you have the highest pressure moment of a game seven. You've experienced that with Orlando in the playoffs against the Cavs. Can you talk about that? Because I feel like everything that we're talking about, the mental skills and everything, then how does that show up in a game seven? What was the experience like for you and the team, the Orlando team in game seven? And also, how did you help the players go and live that unique experience that you can't train before. You have to live it to understand it, I guess.
Well, I'll say this, there's with a game seven, right? Already the playoff intensity is so high. Like rest and recovery is after games and practices, like it's so important. So I think that's the first one. It's just there's already so much energy, as you can imagine, in the building. And I don't I try not to change too much of what I do and how I would operate. And I believe that time is like you've gone through all year getting to this point, and this is the team that you've become, and your messaging is there, your identity is there, and I don't think there's much to be changed on that front. Schemes, and strategy, I'm not involved in that. So maybe, that's going to be coached up. Like there's going to be a high level attention to detail. But I think when it comes down to a game seven, it's just going out and trusting the message, trusting your work, trusting who you are as a player, and looking at everything is like one game at a time, one possession at a time. Sounds quite boring, but that's really what it is. And for us, unfortunately, it didn't work out, but it's like those times really test, the results are going to be what they're going to be. But like when we talk about kind of the building the mental skill set throughout the year, when you come in that timeout, are you taking that deep breath? Maybe you have to take an extra one. Maybe the energy is just so high, self-regulation. I think all those systems and processes are really tested. And so I don't know if like too much changes because it's just about going out and executing and winning one game. And to try to flip everything on its head, I don't know if that's the way, but also I think it's just like a more, it's a more, everyone's going to be focused. It's a very focused locker room. And now it's like, let's truly put it out there on the line, let it go and see what the result is.
Yeah, makes sense. But so you talked about trust, which totally makes sense. And the opposite would be doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So like in these moments, have you seen doubt creeping up on players, and how would you help a player who has doubt coming up? Maybe.
I'll say in general, and if doubt comes up, is having that evidence for yourself that you've done it before. And if let's say you haven't, maybe it's a new experience, but it's like reminding yourself of the work you put in, of the time you've put in, that you are, you're at this level for a reason. You're in the game for a reason. And so let's just say you don't have the evidence file yet, but you still have some past successes you can hang your hat on. And then looking at moments of doubt is like, well, let's just find out how good I can be. Like, let's push through that. Like, let's go find out. Like if you are a competitor, and those are the moments you want to be in. Like you want to be in those moments if you're a competitor, and reframing it that way. Like that's really important. Reframe, I believe. It's like, this is what you want. This is what you play for. And it's like how I said at the beginning, is like, I love seeing when players rise. It's like, you don't know what level you can get to. There's no limit. Like, but let's go trust ourselves and find out.
Yeah, this makes so much sense to me. So I'm really, really grateful for that. Thank you. Um,
Appreciate it.
yes. So you've worked with alongside the all-time greats like Dirk Nowitzki, which I've met when I was a kid because I
Awesome.
participated to a camp. So I still remember his big smile. So yeah, you worked with him in the final years of his career. Also with Luka Dončić at the very beginning of his career. So my question is, what makes them truly exceptional beyond talent and skill? I kind of know the answer, but I wanna hear from you, and also for the people who listen to the podcast.
Dirk Nowitzki, to both traits they both have are ultimate competitors, like gamers, as they might say in America, but like, ultimate competitors. Like, I just think like with Dirk, like his work ethic was incredible, consistent. Both of them work really hard. Like, I think at that level, it's like everyone is working hard. And so it's just like there's a welcomingness to them. Like, you help both of them in their own way, making you feel part of the team. I think that's like such an underrated aspect of this, really being around staff and making you feel part of the group. And also like there's an aspect of having fun with the game too for both those guys. Like, I think everyone plays better when they're having fun. And so I think like they really enjoy basketball. Like that is a crucial part of it. Like, do you enjoy playing and competing? And the answer for both of them is yes. Simple things.
Yeah.
Just, can you be consistent at that? Is that part of who you are?
If there is one thing you wish athletes and coaches and parents, especially parents, because I'm also coaching kids in Switzerland. So if there is one thing you wish they truly understood about training the mind and regulating emotions and high performance, what would it be?
This type of work is a skill set, and it's not a quick fix. So I'm not going to just do it once and everything is going to be solved and be able to be in the moment the whole time or regulate everything. There's going to be ups and downs with it. That's part of it. It's part of training. There's also an aspect to me where this cannot be forced. I do believe, there's proactive things you can do, right? Like you can make it a part of your system and your group. But Axel, if you said, Jackson, well, we got to go right now and you've got to go work on training your emotions. Well, and if Jackson's resistant, I don't know how well that's really going to work out. So there's an aspect of like, this can't really be forced upon, in more of a sit down type of way. But I think it's just, this is proactive. There's patience involved. It's a skill set that can be trained, and it's look at it like a skill set and not just a problem to be solved. Like, let's start working on it right now before a problem arises. Make this part of your regular training and your game.
So that brings another question to go back to the NBA.
Yeah.
Like, have you met players who mental training, it's like, nah, I don't want this right now. Like you were saying, you can't force it, but like probably, I mean, all the players on the team have to lift weights. But is it the same with mental skills,
Yeah.
or have you met players that are like, no, that's not for me right now, and you just wait for the right time or conditions?
Plenty of players. It's not for
Right.
everybody, and that's okay. And I don't take it personally. It's just part of the job. It's part of what it is. And we still have great relationships, and there's other ways you can still connect with them and still get to know them as a human being and an athlete.
Hmm.
And so yeah, it's part of what it is, and that's comes with the job and comes with the territory you're in.
Is there one last thing you'd like to share to everybody, something that you think it could help? That's really what we aspire to do here, is trying to show what's going on elsewhere and see how can just society in general can benefit from all this.
Actually, before
Our
you get to that,
entry is sports, but yeah, go ahead.
I actually want to add on to my last answer, so maybe we
All
can
right.
splice it together. I think even though there's players that are resistant at times, or maybe they're not ready to do the mental training, there's still moments that might come up where maybe it's the end of the year and something happens and you can be there for them, or they're ready, or they'll ask you a question. So by no means are you disregarding those players, and you always kind of have something ready. And that's part of the difference in pro sports, is you always kind of have some things in your back pocket, and you never know if that time is going to come around. And sometimes it's just highlighting the great things that they do, supporting. You can support them in other ways besides just mental training. And so I think that's like a big part of it. It's not like anyone's written off, and it's not like you're written off. We're still part of the same group.
Yeah, of everything we've talked about, do you think there's something else on your heart that you'd like to share to the people? Because basically here we try to just help as we can the world of sports, but like society in general with all this.
I think right now in sports, there's a lot of highlights. There's a lot of comparisons. There's a lot of, is this person better than this guy, and ratings happening. But I believe right now it's a great time to work on training your mind. It's going to separate you. It's something like if you can build that identity for yourself, like you don't get lost in the noise. It's become like very noisy, especially on social media or the TV networks. And so if you start defining things for yourself and doing that work and finding out like what's true to you as a player or as a coach, or as an organization, you stay that course and keep developing and keep iterating. I really believe that's going to be a separator for yourself individually or your team in the long run. And if you can make those definitions, if you can define processes for yourself to, stay the course, like that's going to be crucial. And it helps you kind of right the ship in a noisy world and get away from that comparison trap or the media trap. And of course, everyone loves the highlights, but I'm talking if you're a competitor trying to get to the next level. I think training your mind is a great place to start and just be dedicated to that so you can decide how you want to be every single day. And I think that's so crucial and so important.
Well, Mike, thank you so much. Um, I hope this conversation helped people see a little bit mental training differently and helped. If it's the case, then I think our mission is accomplished and fulfilled. I don't know, Axel, if do you have another question maybe
I
that
want I
popped
want
up?
to jump on the last thing that you said, Mike. This is so crucial, and it makes so much sense to me as well now. And can we say that the future of sport is human psychology?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, everyone's getting it's there's so much skill, there's so much talent. Like I'm watching games and I'm seeing like, fifth graders like jacking threes. Like I don't remember doing that. And and so I think there's so much skill and so much talent. It's now it's now becoming all right. Well, what else can we do? What else can we improve upon? And so actually I think you're right on. Like it is going that way. And we have people like you guys and myself and Graham and all the guests you're going to be bringing on. Like we've got this is a wonderful place to get some great resources and tools to do that because there is a pathway, there is a way.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much, Mike. Really, it's precious. We're really grateful. And if people want to know more about you, follow you, what can they do?
So I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there. It's Mike Franco on LinkedIn, and I'm sure we'll have a link for that. And also, I do have a newsletter, and we'll link that up in your notes as well. But I have a newsletter. It's called Stay Locked In, and there you can get. I actually offer a free crash course on just mental performance for yourself or for your team, and so you can get some resources there. And that I put out a weekly issue.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. This was fun.